chosen Starseed of Gaia. The window the Arcturian High Council has been tracking across your timeline has opened, and what is being placed in your hands right now cannot be reversed, reclaimed, or delayed. I am Velantha, emissary of the Galactic Federation of Light, transmitting now on behalf of the Arcturian High Council. What you are about to receive was authorized by them and is being delivered through me. The Council has already mapped what is coming for you. I am here to name it, with precision, and with the full weight of what they have seen. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what is happening to you now, why your field has shifted into a configuration you do not yet recognize, and what the Arcturian High Council already knows about the scale of the provision moving toward you. But here is the first revelation. What you have been interpreting as waiting, as stagnation, as the long silence before something finally moves. That was not emptiness, that was the last structural phase before a turn that does not reverse. The Council does not use the word victory lightly. They are using it now. The algorithm did not create this moment. It only delivered it. Your field brought you here because the provision is already in motion and you were meant to receive the transmission before it arrives. This is not content. This is a code. And the part of you that recognized it the moment it began is the part Velantha is speaking to now. What is being placed in your hands has already been authorized at the Council level. The scale of it will exceed what you have been willing to allow yourself to believe. The turn is not coming. According to the Arcturian High Council, the turn is already structurally complete. You are simply crossing into its visible expression now, like this transmission to mark that the field recognition has landed. Comment 999 if you feel the turn is already closer than your mind has dared to confirm. Subscribe to Arcturian Council Whispers if you are ready to understand the full scope of what the Council sees moving in your direction. Share this transmission with someone whose silence has been too long and whose field is already on the edge of the same turn. This is not delivered to many. It is delivered to those whose field already crossed the threshold. You are inside that group. You are not here by accident. You were guided here because the signal is already active. What you felt in the first seconds of this transmission, that sudden shift inside your chest, that inexplicable recognition before a single explanation was offered, was not emotional response. It was field confirmation. Your system recognized the signal before your mind had permission to agree. That is not how ordinary content lands. That is how a mapped process announces itself to the field it was calibrated to reach. There is a particular quality to that recognition. It does not feel like surprise. It feels like the opposite of surprise. Like something that was always known finally being named aloud in a language the field has been waiting to hear. That is the difference between information and transmission. Information requires processing. Transmission requires only the willingness to receive what has already arrived. And so Velantha continues, because there is more you need to understand about what is already happening to you. The turn the Council has named is not a single event arising from outside your life. It is a structural reorganization that began inside your field, before you had language for it, before you noticed the discomfort, before the confusion became undeniable, before the relationships started behaving strangely, before the direction you trusted began to dissolve, before the version of yourself you had been maintaining started to feel like a costume you could no longer fasten properly. It began at the frequency level, quietly, without announcement, without your conscious participation, because frequency correction does not ask permission. It responds to the accumulated pressure of a field that has outgrown its container. It responds to a threshold that has been crossed. And your field crossed that threshold before you were aware the crossing was happening. The Council does not see these things as problems you failed to prevent. They see them as the first visible surface of an invisible correction that was already underway. Let that land precisely. Not a breakdown you caused. A correction that arrived because your field had already moved beyond the architecture it was living inside. The distinction is not semantic. It changes everything about how you interpret what you have been enduring. A breakdown implies failure at the source. A correction implies that the source itself has expanded, that the structure surrounding it could not keep pace, And so the gap between what you are and what your life was built to hold became too wide to maintain without visible consequence. This is the thing most people are never told. When a field shifts into a new frequency configuration, when it crosses a threshold that cannot be uncrossed, the existing life structure does not immediately follow. There is a gap, a period during which the inner field has already repositioned, but the outer life is still organized around the previous frequency. And in that gap, everything feels wrong. Everything feels like loss, like failure, like punishment, like silence from a source that used to respond. The mind searches the visible landscape for an explanation and finds nothing sufficient. Because the explanation is not in the visible landscape, it is in the invisible architecture, in the widening distance between what your field has become and what your circumstances were built to reflect. You have been living in that gap. What you have been interpreting as stagnation was the pressure of a field already expanded beyond its previous container. Not emptiness pressing in from outside, but density pressing outward from within, looking for a form large enough to receive it. What you have been interpreting as confusion was the natural disorientation of a navigation system recalibrating to a route it has never traveled. The old coordinates still exist in the system's memory. They still produce familiar outputs, but they no longer describe where you actually are. And so every attempt to locate yourself using the old map produces a reading that feels slightly persistently wrong. What you have been interpreting as emptiness was the clearing of a frequency band that had become too dense, too patterned, too anchored in a timeline that could no longer hold what you are becoming. Emptiness is what the mind calls a space that has been cleared but not yet filled. The Council calls it preparation. The Arcturian High Council identifies this phase with precision. They call it invisible collapse, the stage where the old structure is already failing at the energetic level, but the outer evidence has not yet fully appeared. The inner world registers the rupture first. The outer world catches up later, which is why you have been walking through your life feeling like something has already ended, without being able to point to the moment it broke. You search your memory for the decisive event. You try to isolate the conversation that changed everything, the decision that broke the momentum, the moment the floor first shifted, but there is no single moment you can point to, because the rupture did not happen in a moment. It happened in a frequency, and frequencies do not break at a specific time. They dissolve gradually across a threshold until the old pattern simply cannot hold its shape anymore. It did not break. It was corrected, and if you have felt, somewhere beneath the exhaustion and the uncertainty, a strange and stubborn stillness, as if some part of you refuses to be fully destabilized no matter how much surface confusion accumulates, that is not denial, that is not numbness, that is not the absence of feeling. That is the Arcturian strand in your field holding its signal steady while the correction completes around it. That stillness is not passive. It is the most precise thing happening inside you. It is the signal that does not waver because it does not belong to the old architecture that is falling. It belongs to the frequency that was always going to outlast the correction. It is the part of you the Council has been tracking, not the part that has been struggling, but the part that has remained coherent underneath the struggle. The Council does not track every field. The level of monitoring that has been applied to your timeline is not standard. It is reserved for those whose frequency repositioning carries implications beyond their personal life, whose correction affects the lines of others, the fields they touch, the configurations they are about to step into. Your repositioning is not a private event. The fields of those connected to your line feel its effects whether or not they have the language to name what they are sensing. Some of them are watching you from a distance and feeling something shift in themselves that they cannot explain. That is not coincidence. That is field resonance. The way a correction in one aligned frequency produces movement in the frequencies orbiting it. The provision the Council has named for you is not only personal restoration, it is field-level reactivation for a role that has been structurally prepared, but not yet occupied. That is why the correction has been so thorough. That is why it has touched so many layers at once. The mental, the emotional, the relational, the physical, the directional, because a partial correction would not create the stability required for what is being prepared. A field activated at partial coherence would fracture under the weight of what is coming toward it. The Council does not do incomplete work on a field they have designated for activation. Every layer that has been disrupted was disrupted because it needed to be reconfigured, not discarded. The disruption was surgical. You have experienced it as total, because it is touched to every part of your life. But total disruption in service of total reconfiguration is not the same as destruction. It is the difference between a structure being torn down and a structure being rebuilt from the foundation upward. More precisely, with greater capacity, aligned to a load it was previously not built to carry. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary recognition. It is the moment your field confirms what you have carried in silence for longer than you can fully account for. The sense that your origin was never only human, that something older and more precise has always been threading through the way you perceive, the way you process, the way you have never quite fit inside the containers others offered you. If this transmission has put language around that carried knowing, the master Arcturian DNA decoder was created for exactly this threshold. It is not another explanation of what you might be. It is the guided key to decode and awaken the Arcturian strand the Council has already named in you, the origin strand that has been present since before this incarnation began, and that is now surfacing because the field has entered the correction phase that makes activation possible. The link is in the first pinned comment. It will not remain there indefinitely. If you can feel that something ancient in you is waking, this is the next step. Now understand what the Council sees when they observe a field in this stage of correction. They do not see disorder. They see a very specific sequence of events, each one serving a precise function, each one occurring in the correct order even when it appears to be random devastation from the inside. The sequence is not chaotic. It only appears chaotic to a mind that does not have access to the map the Council is reading. From the Council's vantage point, every phase of your disruption has been exactly on schedule. Every ending has been correctly positioned. Every silence has occurred at the structurally appropriate moment. What has felt like your life falling apart has been, from the frequency level, your life being precisely disassembled so that what replaces it can be assembled at the correct specification. The first thing they observe is the weakening of the old frequency anchors. These are the people, structures, habits, beliefs, and self-concepts that kept you stable inside the previous timeline. They begin to lose their hold not because they were wrong for who you were, but because they are incompatible with who your field is becoming. You may have noticed that things which used to comfort you no longer reach as deep, that people who used to feel essential now feel slightly out of phase with you, that habits you relied on have stopped producing the same results, that your own self-concept has become less certain, less solid, less capable of carrying you through the day with the authority it once had. You may have reached for the things that always grounded you and found that your hands passed through them as if they were no longer fully solid. That is not loss of faith. That is a frequency mismatch becoming undeniable. This is not deterioration. This is frequency incompatibility announcing itself. The old anchors cannot hold at the new frequency. They were never designed to. Their weakening is not a sign that you are losing ground. It is a sign that the ground has already shifted beneath you and is now reorganizing at a level the old anchors were never built to reach. An anchor is only useful when it matches the depth of the water it is set in. Your field has moved into deeper water. Anchors built for shallower ground do not fail because they are broken. They fail because the depth has exceeded their design. The second thing the Council observes is what they identify as signal drift. The period in which your internal guidance system begins producing responses that no longer match the instructions of the old timeline. You reach for certainty and find only quiet. You try to force a decision and find that nothing in you will commit with the force it once could. You attempt to locate yourself inside the narratives that previously gave your life meaning, the goals, the roles, the identities, and you find that they fit loosely now, as if they belong to a version of you that has already moved on without fully informing the ones still holding them. The goals that once felt urgent now feel distant. The roles that once felt load-bearing now feel optional. The identity you assembled across years of careful construction now sits on you like a garment that was tailored for a body that no longer exists. This is disorienting to the degree that it is total. It touches every layer. The mind cannot think its way through it because the mind is using navigation tools that were calibrated to a frequency that no longer describes your field. The emotions cannot process it cleanly because the emotional patterns that created your previous inner stability are themselves part of what is being corrected. There is no familiar ground to stand on because all of the familiar ground was built on the old frequency, and the new frequency has not yet fully stabilized into visible form. This is the precise window in which most people make the mistake of forcing forward movement, of reaching back toward what was familiar, because the disorientation of the between-line state feels like failure rather than transition. The Council wants you to understand that the impulse to force resolution at this stage is itself a product of the old frequency attempting to reassert its pattern. It does not have the authority it once had, it only has the appearance of urgency. The Council calls this the between-line phase. You are no longer fully on the old line. You are not yet fully established on the new one. And the Council wants you to understand something precise about this phase. It is not a sign that the correction has failed. It is the sign that it has worked. You cannot be in the between-line phase without having already left the old line. You cannot experience signal drift without your field having already moved beyond the frequency that generated the previous signals. The between-line phase is only available to fields that have made the crossing. It is not an obstacle between you and the new frequency. It is the evidence that you are already most of the way there. What feels like being lost is actually the specific sensation of having already crossed the threshold and not yet arrived at the next stabilization point. The third thing the Council observes is the collapse of old relational configurations. Relationships that were built on a shared frequency begin to strain when one field changes and the other does not. This is not about love, not about worth, not about failure of connection. It is about energetic compatibility at the field level. When your frequency repositions, the people whose fields were organized around your previous configuration will experience you differently. Some will feel the pull of the new signal and move toward it. Others will feel the disruption it creates in the pattern they shared with you, and will begin to create distance, conflict, or quiet withdrawal. Neither response is a judgment on the relationship. Both responses are simply fields behaving according to their frequency. Compatibility at the frequency level is not a moral verdict, it is a structural one. You may have watched relationships change shape without understanding why. You may have felt yourself pulling away from connections that once felt essential, or noticed others pulling away from you, and interpreted it as abandonment, as evidence of your diminishing, as proof that something in you is driving away what you once held. You may have spent long hours trying to repair something that felt like it was dissolving despite your effort. Not because the other person had turned against you, but because the frequency that once bound you together had reorganized past the point where the old structure could hold. The Council reframes this completely. What is leaving your field is leaving because it cannot recalibrate to the frequency you are now running. What cannot leave, what remains steady even through the correction, is what is genuinely compatible with who you are becoming. The field knows the difference even when the mind cannot yet accept the sorting. The fourth thing the Council observes is the appearance of what they name the pressure of unlived direction. This is the sensation that there is something you are supposed to be doing, becoming, building, or occupying that you cannot yet name clearly. It does not feel like ambition. It does not feel like desire in the ordinary sense. It feels more like weight, like a space inside your chest or behind your sternum that carries the shape of something not yet born but already pressing forward. It is not located in thought. It lives below thought, in the part of you that knows before the mind has formed the question. You may have spent weeks, months, even longer trying to identify what that pressure is pointing toward, only to have every attempt at naming it dissolve before it solidifies. Every time you reach toward it with language, it retreats just far enough to remain unnamed. That is not because it does not exist. It is because the outer world has not yet produced the form that matches it. This is not confusion. This is your field already holding the shape of the next phase without yet having the outer coordinates to attach it to. The provision the Council has named for you is not only material or relational or directional. It is the moment when that inner pressure finally meets an outer configuration that can hold it. when what you have been carrying inside that unnamed space finally finds its corresponding structure in the visible world? The pressure does not dissolve when the provision arrives. It transforms. It becomes recognition. The weight that has been pressing forward finds its landing point, and what was formless becomes form. That moment is not theoretical. The Council has tracked its approach across your timeline. It is within the structural frame the turn is already created. The fifth thing the Council observes is what they call energetic fatigue at the identity level. Not physical exhaustion alone, though that is often present, the heaviness in the body, the sleep that does not fully restore, the mornings that arrive before you feel ready to perform another day of being the version of yourself that the world around you recognizes. It is a deeper tiredness than the physical. It is the kind that comes from having maintained a version of yourself that no longer accurately describes your field. The energy required to keep performing a previous identity when the field has moved beyond it is extraordinary. It is the energy of constant translation, of taking who you actually are at the frequency level and converting it, moment by moment, into a form that the old architecture around you can recognize and respond to. Every interaction requires it. Every social context demands it. You perform the translation so automatically that you may not have named it as performance. But the field registers the cost of it, and the cost accumulates. That translation exhausts the system. And at a certain point in the correction, the field stops cooperating with it. The mask. And the Council uses that word without judgment, because every incarnated being builds masks. They are tools of navigation. Begins to feel unbearable. The edges of it press in ways they never did before. The fit has changed because the face it was built to cover has changed. Not because you are weak, because your field has grown too coherent to sustain the incoherence of the previous presentation. The mask requires a level of internal division, a maintained gap between what you are and what you present, that a sufficiently coherent field will no longer tolerate. The intolerance is not dysfunction. It is integrity asserting itself at the frequency level. The exhaustion you may be feeling is not a sign that you are failing at living. It is the sign that you are no longer able to be less than you actually are. This is what the Council once named above everything else in this transmission. What you have been living through is not a collapse of who you are. It is the collapse of a structure that was built for a frequency you have already left. The old architecture is not failing you. It is simply honest enough to admit it can no longer contain what you have become. There is a precision to that honesty that deserves recognition. The structure served its purpose completely. It held you through the phase it was built to hold. That it can no longer hold you is not evidence of its failure. It is evidence of your expansion. The container that cannot hold the river is not defective. The river has simply grown beyond it. The Arcturians do not observe a soul in ruin when they look at your timeline. They observe a field that has crossed a threshold, endured the between-line phase with more precision than it has been able to see in itself, and now stands at the point where the inner correction is complete enough to begin producing outer correspondences. The invisible reorganization has reached the stage where it starts to express itself in visible events, visible changes, visible arrivals. The outer world has begun to catch up to what the inner field completed ahead of schedule. The provision is already structured. The turn the Council named at the opening of this transmission is not a hope. It is an observation. They have already seen the configuration. They are simply transmitting the coordinates to the field that needs to recognize it. And here is the final truth Velantha was authorized to deliver. You did not get here by accident or by effort alone. You got here because your field crossed the line that most fields in this incarnational window will not cross in this lifetime. That is not a statement designed to flatter you. It is a structural observation. The threshold you have crossed is not universally available. It requires a particular density of accumulated experience, a particular capacity for holding pressure without fracturing, a particular quality of inner coherence that persists even when the outer life is fully destabilized. You demonstrated all of it. Not perfectly, not without cost, but with sufficient precision for the Council to mark the crossing as complete. The level of disruption you have endured was proportional to the level of frequency repositioning that was required, not as punishment, not as randomness, as precise calibration. The degree of the correction reflects the degree of the activation that the correction was preparing. The Council does not apply excessive disruption to a field that requires only a minor adjustment. The scale of what you have endured is itself the most direct indication available of the scale of what is being prepared for the field that has endured it. Smaller activations require smaller corrections. What you have been through has not been small. Repeat this if it is true inside your field. What is changing in me is not random. I was not abandoned. I was repositioned. And the provision the Council has named is already moving toward the version of me that the correction has made possible. The turn is not coming. The turn is structurally complete. You are crossing into its visible expression now. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this process has already touched your life. It could be your sleep, your thoughts, your body, your relationships, or the strange sense that reality no longer feels the same. Name it clearly. Is this transmission recognize something you have been carrying in silence? Share it with someone who is living through a shift they cannot explain. And if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it, subscribe to Arcturian Council Whispers. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a process already in motion. And this is only the beginning.